We're hearing reports of yet another potential shooting involving federal agents in Minneapolis.
4:27 a.m., Minneapolis, Minnesota. The city had been burning for 3 nights straight. Smoke still hung in the air from overturned police cruisers. Shattered glass glittered under streetlights. The National Guard patrolled in armored vehicles. But federal agents weren't watching the protests. They were watching something else, something hidden beneath the chaos, something that made the riots look like a distraction. Because while Minneapolis burned, children were disappearing. Over 230 missing in 10 days. No pattern, no connection, no explanation that made sense. Until now. If you want the full truth about what happened next, hit like so this news reaches more people who need to see it. The convoy rolled without sirens. 15 black SUVs, no markings, no lights, just the low rumble of engines cutting through the pre-dawn silence. Inside those vehicles sat 320 federal agents. FBI, ICE, Homeland Security investigations, U.S. Marshals. They'd been briefed an hour earlier under sealed conditions. The target was a building most residents had never noticed. A private immigrant hotel on the city's south side. Plain brick exterior. A small sign near the entrance. Windows dark. Curtains pulled tight. On paper, it was a temporary shelter for refugee families waiting on permanent placement. A humanitarian facility funded through nonprofit grants. On the thermal imaging scans, it was something else entirely. Heat signatures where they shouldn't be. Movement patterns that didn't match residential housing. Security measures inconsistent with a shelter. The lead vehicle stopped 2 blocks away. Agents exited in silence, tactical gear, body armor, rifles ready. And they moved through the shadows like water finding cracks. The building had armed guards. That detail alone changed everything. Refugee shelters don't need armed security. They don't need reinforced doors. They don't need surveillance cameras covering every angle. But this one did. The breach team reached the entrance at 4:33 a.m. precisely. A hydraulic ram swung back, then forward with devastating force. The door exploded inward. Immediately, gunfire erupted from the second floor. Muzzle flashes lit the darkness in rapid bursts. Automatic weapons, AK-47s. Rounds tore through drywall and splintered wooden railings. The federal team took cover, returned fire, advanced in coordinated movements. The firefight lasted less than 3 minutes. 4 guards were subdued. 2 others dropped their weapons and surrendered. The building fell silent except for boots on stairs and commands over radios. Then agents began opening doors. The first room stopped everyone cold. Rows of beds, children lying motionless, not sleeping, sedated, drugged into unconsciousness to keep them quiet. Medical personnel rushed in, checked vitals, started administering naloxone, but it was the next detail that turned the raid into something darker. On the children's wrists were numbers, written in black marker, not names, not intake, IDs, inventory numbers, like products in a warehouse. Comment rescued below if you believe these children deserve justice. The implications hit immediately. This wasn't a shelter, it was a holding facility, a staging ground. The children weren't guests, they were cargo. And if they had inventory numbers, it meant they were part of a system, a network, like a supply chain. Agents moved floor by floor. Every room revealed more victims, more numbers, more evidence of something operating at scale. By 5 a.m., the building was secured. Medical teams began stabilizing victims for transport. Evidence collection units photographed everything. Then someone found the basement. The entrance was hidden behind a false wall in the utility room. Reinforced steel door, electronic lock, backup power supply. A breaching charge blew it open. What they found inside wasn't consistent with humanitarian work. The space had been converted into a medical facility. Surgical lights, gurneys, refrigeration units, medical supplies organized with clinical precision, and in a small office, a laptop sat open. The screen showed a spreadsheet, but not guest records, not intake forms, inventory. DAS line items organized by age, gender, physical characteristics. Each entry had a number matching the wrist markings upstairs. Each entry had a price. Each entry had a destination code. Some entries included specific requests. Corneas, kidneys, liver tissue. This wasn't just human trafficking. It was organ harvesting. The children weren't being sold whole. They were being sold in parts. Type yes if you're ready to see how deep this network goes. Investigators cross-referenced the spreadsheet against missing persons reports. The matches came back immediately. Sarah Johnson, age 8, reported missing 6 days earlier from St. Paul, listed as inventory unit 0847. Miguel Torres, age 11, disappeared from a foster home in Brooklyn Center. Unit 0921, Amina Hassan, age 9, vanished during the protests. Unit 1003. The numbers told a story federal agents had suspected but couldn't prove. The civil unrest wasn't random. It was cover. While Minneapolis police responded to 430 violent incidents over 72 hours, while the National Guard deployed 10,000 troops to hold the line, while media cameras focused on burning buildings and street confrontations, a trafficking network operated in the blind spots. The chaos was deliberate, and investigators believed it went higher than street-level criminals. The scale suggested institutional involvement, protection from within the system. That theory led them to Mayor Sophia Abdi Aden, a 42-year-old public official praised for humanitarian work, a Somali immigrant who rose through Minneapolis politics on a platform of helping vulnerable communities. Her administration funded housing programs, distributed food assistance, promoted refugee services. But financial forensics told a different scene. Shell companies tied to her inner circle controlled the facilities where children disappeared. Nonprofit organizations in her network received grants that never reached the programs they funded. Bank records showed wire transfers totaling $81.3 million moving through offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands and Dubai. Payments labeled as consulting fees, administrative costs, security services, all fake. The money flowed in one direction, toward a network that treated human lives as commodities, and the network was about to make its biggest move yet. Intelligence teams monitoring port activity identified an anomaly. 12 shipping containers registered as humanitarian aid, listed cargo, clothing, blankets, medical supplies. Scheduled departure, 48 hours, but thermal scans revealed heat signatures inside, and the weight didn't match the manifest. The containers weren't filled with supplies, they were filled with people. If this shocks you, hit like now before we show you what happened next. The task force commander made a critical decision. He didn't brief Minneapolis Police Department command. He didn't notify City Hall, because leaks had been a problem throughout the operation. Every time federal agents planned a raid, the targets seemed to know. Evidence disappeared. The suspects fled. Witnesses went silent. Someone inside the local system was feeding information to the network. So the commander activated a specialized FBI financial crimes unit. One assignment: trace the pre-shipment payments connected to those 12 containers. Within 6 hours, they found it. Six-figure bribes wired to port officials. Payments designed to bypass final inspection lanes. Timestamps aligned perfectly with the departure schedule. The network was paying to make sure no one looked inside those containers before they left American soil, and the clock was ticking. At 2:17 a.m., a surveillance aircraft circling at 20,000 feet picked up a signal. Mayor Aden's encrypted phone pinged a cell tower near the industrial waterfront, miles from City Hall, miles from any emergency command center. She was moving toward the port. The task force split operations. One team stayed at the hotel securing evidence. Another raced toward the waterfront. The Minneapolis port holds thousands of shipping containers, stacked in identical rows, coded with numbers that mean nothing without the registry. Finding 12 specific boxes in that steel maze would normally take hours, but investigators used pattern analysis. They tracked the same logistics company that moved the mayor's humanitarian shipments, the same routes, the same handlers, the same blind spots in port security coverage. They found the containers in a dead zone, no cameras, no active cranes, tucked away from normal traffic patterns, and a crane was already moving. A Panamanian-flagged cargo ship sat alongside the berth. The first container was being lifted toward the hold. The loading had begun. Share this so more people understand what almost happened. The convoy was 4 minutes out when the tactical commander gave the order. Stop the lift, secure the load, prevent departure. The lead armored vehicle hit the chain-link perimeter gate at 60 miles per hour. Metal screamed. The gate tore free from its posts. Agents poured through the gap, spreading between stacked containers, moving toward the crane, the ship, the truck lanes. The crane operator saw them coming. He made a choice that could have killed everyone. The 40-foot container swung out over the ship's open cargo hold, 20 feet above the deck, swaying on cables like a pendulum. Inside were 20 sedated children. Behind a false wall, 3 tons of narcotics. If the operator released the cables, the container would plummet. The impact would kill the children. The narcotics would scatter across the hold. A sniper team on the Port Authority building roof had a solution. One shot. The bullet struck the crane's hydraulic manifold. Fluid sprayed. The arm shuddered. The crane ground to a halt. The container froze mid-swing. Still airborne, still swaying. Agents rushed the control cab, cut power, secured the operator before he could finish what he started. Then they guided the container down to the asphalt. A thermal lance cut through the locking bars. The doors swung open, boxes of rice stacked as camouflage. Behind a false wall, modified bunks holding 20 unconscious children, and packed into the remaining space, bricks of narcotics, fentanyl, methamphetamine, black tar heroin. The network had been shipping children and drugs together, using humanitarian aid branding to discourage inspection, betting that no customs official would thoroughly search a container marked for refugee relief. It almost worked. By sunrise, the port was under federal lockdown. All 12 containers were intercepted. The totals confirmed the scale. 3 tons of narcotics. 200 children rescued from the hotel and port combined. $2.4 billion in fraud traced through shell companies disguised as charities. And Mayor Sophia Abdi Aden was arrested on Highway 35W as she tried to leave the city. Comment justice if you believe she deserves maximum punishment. The evidence against her was overwhelming. Ledgers showing recurring payments labeled as facility fees, security consulting, program administration, all fraudulent. Bank records revealing midnight wire transfers, no scrutiny, no questions. Money flowing to offshore accounts controlled by her associates. Emails between the mayor and accomplices contained explicit instructions. Clear the transfer, no delay. Approve the application by Friday. Ensure inspection is waived. This wasn't incompetence. This wasn't an oversight failure. This was a system. A network built inside government institutions, using public resources, exploiting humanitarian programs meant to protect the most vulnerable. The mayor had been living 2 lives. In public, a champion of refugee rights, a voice for marginalized communities, a symbol of immigrant success. In private, a trafficker moving children like inventory, profiting from suffering, betraying every value she claimed to represent. The investigation identified 47 shell companies. The Somali Relief Fund, the Migrant Housing Initiative, Minneapolis Youth Outreach, all fronts for laundering money and concealing operations. Funds cycled through banks in Dubai, the Cayman Islands, and Singapore before returning to finance shipments. The financial trail spanned 5 countries and involved 23 indicted officials, port inspectors who took bribes, and social workers who falsified reports, court officials who approved fraudulent custody transfers. The corruption reached every level, and the children paid the price. Medical teams treating the rescued victims found evidence of long-term sedation, malnutrition, psychological trauma. Some showed signs of surgical procedures consistent with organ harvesting preparation. The basement medical facility had been operational for at least 18 months. During that time, investigators estimated 400 children passed through the network. Not all were recovered. Some had already been shipped overseas. Some were listed in the spreadsheet with completion dates suggesting procedures had already occurred. The full scope of the tragedy may never be known. If you want updates as more indictments are filed, why hit subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. The arrests didn't end with the mayor. Federal prosecutors moved against her network with speed. Within 72 hours, 23 individuals were indicted on charges ranging from human trafficking to money laundering to conspiracy to harvest organs. Judge Layla Mahad, who approved emergency custody transfers without proper documentation, arrested at her home at 5:18 a.m. Port Authority Director Hassan Abdi, who accepted $340,000 in bribes to bypass container inspections. Arrested at his office, Dr. Amira Osman, who operated the basement medical facility and maintained the surgical equipment. Arrested at Minneapolis-St. Paul International Airport attempting to board a flight to Dubai. Each arrest revealed another layer, another connection, another betrayal of public trust. The network had operated for years, protected by officials who swore oaths to serve and protect, enabled by systems designed to help the vulnerable, and it nearly succeeded in shipping 200 children overseas before federal agents stopped it. The National Guard withdrew from Minneapolis 3 days after the port raid. The streets went quiet. The protests ended, but the damage remained. Families spent weeks in reunification centers. Children who'd been sedated for days required intensive medical care. Psychological trauma specialists warned that recovery would take years. The community struggled with a question that had no easy answer. How could this happen? How could a network operate at this scale without detection? How could public officials sworn to protect children become the architects of their exploitation? The answer is uncomfortable. It happened because people looked away, because systems failed, because corruption found cracks and spread through institutions like rot through wood. Trust in the Minneapolis city government collapsed overnight. Residents demanded resignations. Federal oversight, independent investigations into every program connected to the mayor's administration. The city council appointed an emergency interim mayor. The FBI established a task force dedicated to identifying any remaining network members. But the question lingered. If it happened here, where else is it happening? Type yes if you believe every city needs to investigate their humanitarian programs immediately. The Minneapolis case exposed a vulnerability most communities don't want to acknowledge. Trafficking networks thrive in chaos. They exploit crises. And yet they hide behind humanitarian branding. They use systems designed to help as weapons to harm. And they rely on one thing above all: indifference. When communities stop asking questions, when oversight becomes routine paperwork, when officials operate without scrutiny, that's when darkness finds room to grow. The children rescued from that port didn't disappear because of sophisticated criminal tactics. They disappeared because people weren't paying attention. Reports were filed and ignored. Red flags were raised and dismissed. Concerns were voiced and buried under bureaucracy. Until federal agents kicked down a door at 4:33 a.m. and found children with inventory numbers on their wrists. That moment changed everything. It exposed a network worth billions. It shattered the public image of a mayor praised as a humanitarian. It revealed how institutions meant to protect can be corrupted into tools of exploitation. But most importantly, it sent a message. No network is untouchable. No official is above the law. No amount of chaos can hide evil forever. The 320 agents who executed that raid didn't just rescue 200 children. They proved that justice, even when delayed, can still arrive. And they reminded everyone watching that vigilance matters. Hit like if you believe justice is worth fighting for. The legal proceedings are ongoing. Mayor Sophia Abdi Aden faces 47 federal charges. If convicted on all counts, she could spend the rest of her life in prison. Her co-defendants are cooperating, trading information for reduced sentences. Each cooperation agreement reveals more connections, more officials, more systems were compromised. The federal prosecutors estimate the investigation will continue for at least 2 more years. They believe the Minneapolis network had ties to trafficking operations in 7 other American cities. Grand juries have been convened in Chicago, Detroit, and Seattle. Subpoenas have been issued. Search warrants executed. The work is far from over. But the message is clear. Trafficking networks operating under humanitarian cover will be exposed. Officials who betray public trust will be prosecuted. Children will be protected. This case proves that even the most sophisticated operations leave trails. Financial records, communications, witnesses, evidence that can't be erased, and federal agents are following those trails wherever they lead. Comment exposed if you want to see coverage of the next arrests. The Minneapolis raid will be studied in law enforcement academies for years. It represents a new model for combating trafficking networks that hide in plain sight. The key was coordination. FBI, ICE, Homeland Security, U.S. Marshals, and specialized financial crimes units working as a single team. Sharing intelligence, operating under sealed warrants to prevent leaks, and most critically, waiting for the right moment. The task force could have raided the hotel weeks earlier, but they waited. They watched. They built a complete picture of the network. That patience paid off. By timing the raid to intercept the port shipment, they didn't just rescue victims. They captured the entire operation. The financials, the logistics, the international connections. That evidence will dismantle trafficking networks across multiple cities. The children rescued that morning are receiving care, trauma specialists, medical treatment, family reunification services where possible. Some will heal quickly. Others will carry scars for life. But they're alive. They're safe. And the network that treated them as inventory is destroyed. If you believe this news deserves to reach more people, share it now. This news has shown you what happened in Minneapolis. But the larger this continues, trafficking networks operate in every major American city. They exploit humanitarian systems. They corrupt officials. They hide behind legitimate organizations. And they count on communities being too distracted to notice. The Minneapolis case succeeded because people started paying attention, because investigators refused to accept easy answers, because agents followed evidence even when it led to powerful officials. That same vigilance is needed everywhere. Watch your communities, question anomalies, report concerns, demand accountability from officials who control systems meant to protect the vulnerable. Because the next network is already operating, the next official is already compromised, the next group of children is already at risk. Unless communities refuse to look away, Hit subscribe so you don't miss updates as more indictments are filed and more networks are exposed. The fight against trafficking doesn't end with one raid. It requires constant vigilance, institutional accountability, public awareness, and it requires people who refuse to accept that children can simply disappear without consequences. The 200 children rescued from Minneapolis are proof that action matters, that investigations work, that justice, even when difficult, is possible. But they're also a reminder. For every child rescued, others remain trapped. For every network exposed, others continue operating. For every official prosecuted, others betray their oaths. The work continues, and it requires everyone. Comment never again if you believe trafficking must be fought at every level. This is only the beginning. The Minneapolis case has opened doors, revealed patterns, exposed vulnerabilities that traffickers exploited for years. Federal task forces are now applying the same investigative model to other cities, looking for the same red flags, following the same financial trails, watching for the same blind spots. More raids are coming. More officials will be arrested. More networks will be dismantled. But the ultimate solution isn't more law enforcement. It's more awareness. Communities that ask questions, citizens who report concerns, officials who take accountability seriously. Because trafficking networks thrive in silence. They collapse under scrutiny. The children with inventory numbers on their wrists didn't have voices, but now their story has been told. And that story should haunt anyone who believes exploitation can be hidden behind humanitarian branding. Minneapolis will rebuild. Trust will slowly return. Systems will be reformed. But the memory of that 4:33 a.m. raid will remain. A reminder that darkness can hide anywhere. That corruption can wear any face. That evil can operate under any flag. And that justice, when pursued relentlessly, will eventually arrive. I want to share this video before it gets buried. The truth deserves to be seen. This news is for informational and educational purposes. It does not glorify violence or criminal activity. Its goal is to examine how trafficking networks operate, how investigations expose them, and why community vigilance remains essential to protecting the most vulnerable. The fight continues. Stay informed, stay vigilant, stay engaged.